I know you like that. How long you been back, man? You know you like that. 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 What? You know you like that. Come on. You know you like that.
Good evening, good evening. Come in. Come on in and join us tonight. Remember to go ahead and click like, click share, and subscribe to our YouTube page if you have not done so already. Want to welcome you tonight to another Thursday night with Live It Out Inc. On our Thursday night segment. Our focus for the 2022 year is mental healing. And so far we have met some amazing, phenomenal people that has given us a bunch of resources, bunch of information on our mental health journey. And tonight is no different. Remember, we are a nonprofit organization that focuses on suicide awareness, turning mental health into mental wealth, and educating our community, especially the African American community, on mental health and providing resources for our community. Remember, we always want to have a conversation. We want to change the narrative. We want to have these open dialogues about mental health so we'll know how to get help, so we'll know when it's time to get help, and we'll know where to go when we need help. So tonight, I want you guys to come in. Tonight, we're going to find out how to connect with the therapies that best fits us. We have a phenomenal doctor that's joining us tonight, has taken out the time all the way from Tennessee to come join us and educate us. So if you have any questions while you're in the feed, if you have any questions, I want you guys to just start typing them in the chat. We're going to find out how to connect with a therapist that best fits us. When do you know it's time to go sit on somebody's couch? Because we have some emotional trauma things we be going through. And just this week, I've had a young family member that committed suicide. And I asked myself, did they see the signs, or could it have been avoided? So we need to know what to do. We need to know who to go to. We need to know how to handle these situations and when we see them in family members and friends. So while you guys are coming in, hey, Miss T, thank you for joining. So while you guys are coming in, I'm going to bring from backstage Dr. Courtney. Dr. Courtney is in Tennessee.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Dr. Courtney. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Courtney Williams. And she's in Tennessee, right?
I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, yes.
Yes. So welcome to Live It Out Inc. You girls throw up an L in the chat to welcome Miss Dr. Courtney. I'm sorry, to welcome Dr. Courtney to Live It Out Inc. And let's get this thing started. Let's find out what we need to know. So first of all, Dr. Courtney, I just want you to tell us a little bit about your mental health journey. Like, how did you get into being a therapist? Like, how did you get to being a mental health advocate?
Yes, I think it was a few different things that kind of led me on my path to become a psychologist and pursue that field in particular. So I guess it dates back to early adolescence when, I was the friend that people would always come to for advice. And that's when, the light bulb started going off for me. And so when I went to college, I pursued a psychology degree. And so the more that I learned about all there was to do with psychology, like it's not just pigeonholed to one area. There's so much that I can do with my degree. And I was kind of learning that in college, right? Like I could be a professor, I could be a therapist, I could be a consultant, but psychology is infused into everything that we do. So that really felt like the place for me to be. And I'll say in my last semester of college, I crossed paths with a Black woman who was a counseling psychologist, the first I'd ever seen ever in my whole college career. So I think connecting with her and have her being my mentor for that last semester, being a part of her research lab, that really sent the message to me that I could do that too. So I then went on to pursue my graduate degree. I got my master's and my doctorate degree, but I got my master's from an HBCU, Eagle Pride. And that for me was a game changer, right? Because everywhere you turned was a Black professional, a Black professional with a graduate degree, a Black psychologist here, there. So for me, that even more affirmed that I could do it. And this was, I was on the right path. So psychology was it for me. And I got my degree in counseling psychology. And so I've choose to use it in this way. So counseling and consulting are my main focus areas.
Awesome. So do you feel like it's more, is it more of your passion, or is it just a career path that you decided to follow?
Oh, it is a passion. For me to have gone to school for as long as I did, it was definitely a passion. Because, I could have stopped after my bachelor's, I could have stopped after my master's, but I didn't. And I think for me, the passion really is working with Black women and girls. Yeah. That for me has been my niche. And that's the reason I started my business, my private practice called Will by Wellness. And, I feel like I'm kind of getting back to myself and to my passion, the work that I have always wanted to do.
Okay, so you do have an organization called Will by Wellness, and it's mental health and wellness services for Black women and girls. So talk to me about your brand, how you're building your brand for that. I went to your website and I saw some real awesome things that you were working on. So just talk to us a little bit about Will by Wellness and what type of services that you give the Black women and girls in Tennessee.
Right. So I'll say this, Will by Wellness, again, was a baby idea back in the day for me. And it started with me being in a girls group myself when I was in middle school, like having a group of peers that looked like me, mentors that looked like me, and having a place where I could go that felt safe, a place where I felt seen, where I felt heard, as a little Black girl. And so just having that feeling and carrying that with me, I knew that's something that I'd always wanted to do. So it still feels surreal to have a business that focuses on that. So Will by Wellness, like you said, I offer culturally informed care for Black women and girls through mental health services and wellness resources. So what I offer is individual therapy, group therapy, workshops, trainings, and other consultation services. Not only do I work with Black women and girls, but my focus is also with working with folks who serve Black women and girls. So that may be school systems, that may be different community organizations, and things like that. And I will say that my therapy services are only offered for folks that live in the state of Nashville or the state of Tennessee, because I am licensed in Tennessee. However, my workshops and trainings are for folks that live outside of Tennessee as well. So all over the world.
Yeah. And also on your website, you have some mental health quotes and information on there. So even though we're not in Tennessee, we can still see some of the things that you're doing, some of the motivation stuff you're putting out of there about mental health. And it was really, I was very impressed. So Dr. Courtney, you are reaching people far beyond Tennessee, especially in our Black community, because it is so shunned, especially when it comes to mental health. Our women, Black women are told, you got to be the strong Black woman. And our Black men are told, well, men don't cry or don't show emotions, because if you do, then you're considered weak. And then when it comes to our Black children, they all over the place. They can't even identify with their emotions and their feelings, and they just basically acting off impulse. Like there is definitely a need in the Black community for mental health education, acceptance, and resources. So, with all that being said, you are doing a phenomenal job, especially with our Black women. So, getting into it, like connecting with the therapist, how do we know when it's time to seek professional help? Like, what are some signs? Maybe when I need to say, like, okay, I'm dealing with this. This is too much. This is too overwhelming. How do I know when it's time for me to just seek professional help and stop talking to my friends or try to vent to somebody else or just saying, Lord, I'm gonna pray about it. We got our spiritual guidance, but when do we need to go see somebody?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good question. And I want to just give a disclaimer to just being a psychologist. I want to make sure that I establish that this is for informational purposes only. And so if folks do have specific concerns about your mental health needs, I'm always going to advise that you consult with your own therapist or establish care with a therapist in your area, right? So this is not me giving specific mental advice to audience members, or this is not a clinical assessment of any sort, and it doesn't substitute for therapy, right? So I just want to make that clear. And, maybe some of the things that folks take away today can help inform some of the decisions that you make. But going back to your question about, when do you know when it's time? I always say, give it a try. You may be looking for a change. You may notice that the same patterns keep happening in your life. Maybe the same relationship patterns, maybe the same communication patterns, and you may feel like you're stuck in the same loop and you're looking for a new way of being. That could be a good indication that therapy may be a good fit for you. Folks come to therapy to have a space to feel safe, to feel seen in ways that they don't in other spaces. Like I've had folks work with me on racial trauma, on discrimination, on things like that, because especially for my folks with marginalized identities, they don't feel seen in other spaces. So those are two big things that stick out for me. And I always say that you can have Jesus and a therapist, right? And so I talk about that on my website some too. Like you can have both. You can pray and you can meditate and go to therapy. I think both are true. I think both are valid.
Okay, so another question. How do I go about choosing a therapy that best fits me? Like if I'm an African American woman, if I'm gay, or if I'm a Christian, if I'm a man, if I'm an atheist, if that identifies with me, and how important is it that I find a therapist that can identify or at least understand who I am?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think goodness of fit is very important. So finding a therapist that feels like a good fit for you. I think what folks should ask themselves when they're seeking out a therapist is what matters in a therapist. Do you want your therapist to have specific shared identities to you? Like, do you want a Black therapist? Do you want a therapist with a religious affiliation? Do you want a therapist that matches your gender identity? Or does none of that matter? Some people that matters more, some people it doesn't matter as much. Also thinking about cost, like that's going to be important for some folks. Like, do you want a therapist that takes your insurance? Do you want a therapist that's lower cost? Or does money not matter to you? So those are things that tend to filter down what avenues to pursue when you're looking for a therapist, looking for a goodness of fit. And you mentioned earlier about trauma, about grief. So online, you can look for therapists that may have specific clinical interests, clinical areas of focus, even specialty areas or trainings. And that's another way that you can find someone that may match to best fit your needs and your concerns. I'm trying to think of other things, but those are what comes to mind for now.
Oh, okay. And as a therapist, what are the expectations of the patient, of the patient or the client? What do you expect from your patients coming in as a new potential client?
Yeah. I will say this, every client is going to be different. And I've learned that I have to meet my clients wherever they are. There are some folks that are more talkative and more open to disclose personal information. And then there are some folks that are more protected and more defended. And so it may be that it takes more for folks to warm up to me, to the space, to the process. And that's fine too. My style is very collaborative. I always say that, I may be the expert in my own right, being a doctor, having training, having, my clinical background, things like that. But my clients are the expert of their experience. So I'm going to recommend things that I feel like work for you and for what you're telling me your concerns are and what your therapy goals are. And you're going to have to try them, right? You're going to have to be open and willing enough to try my recommendations and to let me know what's working, what's not working, so that we together can modify, can change, can pivot if we need to, so that we can get you to your goals.
Okay, awesome. Learning so much. Okay, so after you do the initial intake and a person asks, "Do you really think you can help me?" Like, and what's the typical response, or what's the answer to that? Is there a specific answer to that?
Someone actually asked me that maybe a month or so ago, actually. So it's interesting that you're asking me that question. And what I said to them was, what is it that you're looking for, right? Like, can you help me? What does help look like? Like, what is it that you're seeking? Because if you don't know what you're looking for, if you don't know what help looks like, then it's going to be hard to measure whether or not therapy is working or if I'm helping or things like that. But I think if I could follow up, I would want to know those questions. I would want to know if the client can clarify that for me.
Okay. Okay. So what happens when you're away on vacation, or like I said, you may have a family emergency and you have to take some time off? Does my session abruptly stops, or how do we keep going for my treatment?
Right. So it would not be out of nowhere. Like, I'm not going to go off to a desert island for weeks and months without letting you know. But if I were to take a significant amount of time off, I would let my clients know ahead of time to prepare them. And depending on the severity of their case, there may be situations where I refer them to a colleague, another therapist in the meantime, to oversee their care while I'm away. Again, depending on how long I'm away. I always provide crisis resources so that if the clients that I'm working with ever feel like they are in a mental health crisis, they feel like they are experiencing any type of suicidal ideation, they have an immediate resource, right? There's local, there's national suicide hotlines and helplines for folks to get that immediate attention in the moment. And if it's a case where, we've been working together and we kind of got a steady pace going, but maybe there aren't as high risk concerns, but this client wants to still continue care again while I'm away. And again, if it's an extended amount of time, they do have the option of potentially checking in or consulting with a colleague of mine during that time. So it depends on the severity of the case. And then there are some clients that I've had who are not as severe, and they are able to take that time away with me. Like, this is a great opportunity for them to practice the skills that we've been working on, to use the resources that we have established, and for us to reconnect at a later date to see what's working.
Okay, well, that's, I never would have thought about that. So if I'm taking some time, maybe you take this time with me to continue working on what we. Oh, that's a good one. So now, what if I start to have problems between the sessions? What are my options? But I think you touched on it a little bit. The crisis resources. But what if I just, for example, the people with PTSD or bipolar schizophrenic, and they just start to have problems in between these sessions? So what are their options, and what does that look like?
So again, I'd always recommend the crisis care resources that I provide. Those are your national, your local suicide hotlines. If you are feeling emergent concerns, if you're feeling really acute, you can always go to your local ER, call 911. Those are also options as well. There's always the option, and I'm speaking for me, right? Because again, I can only speak for the clients that I'm working with. There's always the option to schedule an earlier appointment if available too. Reaching out to me and saying, hey, there's some things that have come up. Can we push our appointment a little bit earlier? If that is an option, even just a quick check-in or phone consultation, that could be an option.
So as a therapist, do you cut it off like a certain time of the day? Like after I leave the office after 5:00 and I'm home with my family, I'm not dealing with clients anymore. I'm home. So is there a cutoff time?
Short answer, yes. Because I believe in work-life balance, just like I preach work-life balance to the folks that I work with. And I feel like in order for me to really show up and be authentic and give the clients that I'm working with 100%, I have to have some limits to what work is and what, personal life is. And I have been really intentional about not blending the two together. It's an ongoing work in progress.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress. It always is. But that is my goal all the time.
Yeah, not to bring the work home.
Right.
We got to learn how not to bring our work home. So when do you recognize if a particular therapist is not for you? Like, what's my red flag? That it's not, I don't think this is going to work.
Yeah. Could be so many things. I think, the obvious ones, if you are feeling like your therapist is discriminating or further oppressing and further marginalizing you and your identities, and you're feeling microaggressed against, that is a huge red flag. There sounds like they could be causing more harm than help. I think at the beginning, I always like to kind of define what the goals are, where we can measure how we're making progress. Like, I always ask clients that I'm working with, how do we know when we get there? Like, what are you coming in for? And how do we know when we've met our goals or getting close? And If that is clearly fleshed out and outlined and you feel like no progress is happening, then that could be an indicator that maybe something needs to change. Now, I'm not going to say that that means, you know, cancel your therapist, because I think there's always opportunity for the therapist to change and do something different too. And you can give them that opportunity by giving them feedback, because a lot of people don't feel like they do, but you have the right and autonomy to tell a therapist that this isn't working and what we're doing isn't working for me. And that can give them that opportunity to say, okay, like, how can we change? How can we pivot? Like, let's think about doing this a different way. But I would say try to give it a few sessions, maybe 4 or 5, see how things going. Don't bail after 1 or 2 sessions, because you gotta get in the flow. You're learning them, they're learning you, you're learning each other's working style. So give it a few sessions.
Okay. So another question: how important is it for a therapist to have some experience in what you're dealing with? When we were talking about that's when we were talking about the grief, the anxiety, the bipolar, the suicide. So how important is it for therapists to have experiences in those things that a person is specifically dealing with it, or is it like just a general overall experience for you guys in your clinical sessions?
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say this, that there are a lot of therapists, including myself, that are generalist in their training, where we have been trained from different modalities and to work with diverse populations, with diverse presenting concerns and mental health needs. And so in some ways, that helps us be able to see folks all across the board. And I think too that having specific areas of focus and understanding better what your therapist is specifically trained in, like trauma, for example, is a big one. And I think having specialized training related to trauma, related to psychosis, those are where you need specialty areas. I'm also thinking about when you meet with a therapist, hopefully there is a consultation of some sort, like a first meeting or conversation where you as a client can say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. These are what my needs are. And then the therapist can say yay or nay, like that fits within what we call my scope of practice, basically my skill set. So if they are having those conversations, they can tell you from the beginning whether or not your needs or what you're presenting with matches what their scope of care is.
Okay, so that's the conversation needs to be held in the beginning. Okay, that's good to know. Now, during this pandemic, we know everybody has been housed in and locked down, not able to travel, not able to get out. They closed down jobs and stuff. And I know you guys probably started doing things via Zoom. So, have you found therapy to be more effective in person or on Zoom? And what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of having to have a therapy session on Zoom?
So there's pros and cons to both. In a lot of ways, I think that there have been positives with being able to see folks via Zoom or whatever video platform. And the reason being is it's convenient. Folks can take a therapy session, in the privacy of their own home, not having to leave the house or drive somewhere, find parking, all the things. You can just log right on in on your phone or your laptop or your tablet and meet with your therapist. So I've noticed an increase in folks accessing therapy for that reason, just because of the convenience. Even folks that I was meeting with in person prior to the pandemic are now saying, yeah, I just want to keep meeting on Zoom. It works for me. It's more convenient, and my schedule's so busy that I wouldn't have time to commute there and commute back. So um, that works for them. Um, because I've met with folks in person during the pandemic, there were, we wear masks. So you miss a lot of the facial expressions and things like that you would have if the masks weren't there. So a lot of people prefer or have preferred Zoom for that reason, because you can see the whole face, you can see maybe a little bit more of the mannerisms. But again, going back to in person, folks are missing that social energy. So folks opt to in person for that reason. Just sitting across with the live human being, feeling their energy and all of that. That's something that you can't necessarily get on a screen.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So now that we've attended our sessions, what are some questions that we should ask ourselves to recognize if the therapy actually worked? Like, what would we say, or what would the conversation be like, just to see I've gotten to where I wanted to be, it worked, now I can move forward?
Now, are you saying right after a session or once therapy has ended?
No, once we've completed the session, the treatment, not after one session, but after we completed our whole session, our whole timeline, however that is. I don't know if it goes from, depending on how the person is improving or growing or meeting their goals and standards, or is it a certain cutoff point?
So the question would be, or the answer to that would be, some places do have a session limit. It just depends on the site, the organization is offering the services. I will say that typically the treatment plan is individualized for the person. And so you could be meeting with a therapist for 20 sessions. You could be meeting with the therapist indefinitely. You could be meeting with a therapist for 5 sessions. It just depends on what you're coming for and how severe it is, how progressive it is. Is it chronic or is it acute? Like, did it just happen? Is it happening right now and it's stressing you out right now? Or is it something that's been like ongoing and pervasive?
Oh, okay. So at that point, once we reach the end of the session, the end of the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
what am I asking myself? How should I feel?
I think it depends on what you're coming in for. I think that when folks terminate with a therapist, some folks feel really excited, they feel accomplished, and some folks feel scared. They feel nervous. Like, can I really do this without my therapist? We've been working together for X amount of time. Can I really do this without them? So I think you get each of those and, some in between and a mix of all of that. I think that going back to my earlier point about defining what progress looks like for you, what your goals are, and how are they potentially measurable so that when you've accomplished your goals. Those would be questions to have asked yourself ahead of time. And then how does your answer maybe change, or how do you answer it now that therapy is done?
Okay. So we're gonna go to the chat and see if you ladies have any questions you want to ask Dr. Courtney. How do you feel now that we've obtained all this information about connecting with a therapist? Do you feel more confident in seeking one if you need to? Do you know when? When is it time to seek a therapist? Not just for yourself, but for your family, your spouse, or anybody that's closely connected to you. So if you have any questions, please type them in the chat, and we can see if Dr. Courtney can help us out. Because this has been very informative. I've always wanted to see a therapist. And I was like, okay, what's the first step? Like, where do I even begin? As much as I'm okay with it, I'm not scared to go. I just didn't know how to begin the process. Like, what do I need to do? Where do I say? What do I ask? How do I know I'm choosing the right therapist when I do start? So those are some questions that I really, really had for myself. And I just wanted to share them on this platform.
Yeah, I think those are really valid questions. Like, not knowing where to go really stands in the way of even starting the process. And I think, there's a few resources that come to mind. If you think about, your employee assistant program, so your EAP, that may be a good place to start at work, looking to see if they offer therapy through your EAP program, because there are EAP programs that allow you to have where your work pays for X amount of sessions for free. They comp that for you. You could also try looking into local community mental health centers, or even, sometimes local universities and colleges have counseling centers that see community members as well. So you don't necessarily have to go or attend the university or college, but they see community members as well. Also, I'm biased. I think Therapy for Black Girls is a great resource, and they have a directory for local providers in your area. You could always go to Psychology Today as well, and also calling your insurance company too. And they can direct you for providers in your network.
Oh, okay. So now we have some resources to help find help. And I didn't know that about the college, because we have in Atlanta, we Spelman, Morehouse, Clark, Atlanta. So we have all kind of colleges that's like really within the community. So that would be an awesome idea to look into that. Actually, I think I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna look into that just to see if that's a resource out here that we haven't even tapped into using.
Yeah, you should see. I went to the University of Georgia for my PhD, and we had a training clinic, and that particular training clinic offered services to community providers or community members.
Okay, so you're a bulldog.
I am. I'm a bulldog. That's where I got my PhD. I'm an eagle. I went to North Carolina Central University for my master's, and I went to UNC Greensboro for my bachelor. So
you just really a college girl.
Right. Now I'm done.
And well, you are doing awesome work in Tennessee, and keep, giving us the resources on your page. If you can put her Willed by Wellness back up, follow her on IG, Dr. Courtney Williams. She has mental health services for Black women and girls. Anything you got coming up, Dr. Courtney? Any workshops or classes or anything you have coming up soon?
I will say that our featured programs are always ongoing. And so Black Girl Magic is one of our featured programs. And that is a workshop series for Black women. And I tailor that to all age cohorts from 12 and up. And so Black Girl Magic is a 5-part workshop series where we're discussing relationships and self-love and self-care and social justice and professional development. And again, I can cater that to any age group. I also have a program called Poise, and that is typically a school-based program for middle school and high school girls. And we talk about similar things to what was mentioned for Black Girl Magic, but it is a culturally adapted program for adolescent Black girls to discuss self-image, body image, and self-esteem.
Awesome. Awesome. Which is so needed. So needed today with the body shaming and all the surgery that they see women having, Black women having and stuff. We do need to educate our girls on loving themselves and being confident in who they are and accepting themselves and being willed by wellness. I love it. Thank you so much, Dr. Courtney. This it's been kind of heavy, but it's the information that we need. It's really what we needed to hear on how to connect with the therapist. And I thank you so much for giving us all these jewels, for all these resources. And now we can make an informed decision when it comes to choosing a therapist or even just seeking the help that we need. So thank you so much. Live It Out, Inc. You guys have been awesome. Thank you for tuning in this week. Like I told you, we're on a journey to mental wellness, and we on our way. Now we got some more information. So if there's anything else you guys want to talk about, just put it in the chat. We'll keep it going for next week. Throw your L's up for Live It Out. And thank you so much. Happy Valentine's Day. That's why I wore red, because Valentine's Day is coming up.
Boo! Boo!
How dare you boo Valentine's Day.
Wow.
And also February is National Heart Month, Healthy Heart Month. So take care of your heart. Physically and emotionally. My words got gone right now. But take care of your heart. Make sure you take care of your heart. Throw your L's up. Love you guys. Same time, same place next week. See you guys. And thank you so much, Dr. Courtney. You are a gem.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yes, and we're going to connect on IG most definitely.
Definitely.